Hey everyone, welcome back to Bits Brews, or something. I don't know what's going on with this channel anymore. Instead of showing you the whole process, I just got super inspired to make a deck and basically just built it. It's like happened. Now I haven't done any of the refining yet. I've just thrown like 70 cards into a deck list, but it's a great starting point and I'm really excited. Alright, let me tell you about this card. So I was just wandering around Scryfall, as I tend to do. I was looking for something specific, no idea what it was anymore because I quickly got distracted by this card. Kurkesh Okane Ancient. This is an Ogre Spirit. It's mono red, it's 4 mana, and it has the ability that whenever you activate an artifact ability, like an ability from an artifact, you can spend 1 mana and copy that ability. Now this might actually remind you of the 3 mana version of Ashnod, which duplicates any activated ability of a artifact which causes something to get sacrificed, such as anything that sacrifices itself. As long as sacrifice is the cost, it will duplicate the effect, and that is a really cool ability that's very fitting of Ashnod, and you get 3 colors to play with, whereas fun to Kurkesh, you only get red, but Kurkesh triggers no matter what. Now you do have to spend the red mana, so it does give you a little bit of a tax there. It doesn't just go ridiculous, but I think there's a space for this card to actually be a really cool commander. Taking a quick look at EDH Rec, there's only like 500, maybe 600 decks of this commander currently out there, which is exciting for me because I love to build a unknown or lesser played commander. So very quickly I just started throwing the most interesting artifacts into this list, which makes this red deck kind of like a colorless deck. There's very few red artifacts that really synergize well with Kurkesh, but as a colorless list that just has a red commander, it is cool. And I'm kind of into that. I'm not really a big fan of red, but I do sometimes like colorless, so doing a colorless deck but with a colored commander actually kind of works. I'm kind of okay with that. I might actually try that again intentionally in the future. Seems like fun. Either way, threw together these cards, very excited. I need to playtest it, refine it, add cards, cut cards, all that good stuff before I check in with you again. But I'm excited. It's just like on a whim hit me, and that's just really cool. That doesn't always happen, and when it does, you gotta hold on to it. All right, let's go. To make the most of Kurkesh's effect, we want to be absolutely filling our deck with artifacts. We have over 60 artifacts in this deck, including artifact creatures. Not all of them have activated abilities, some are just kind of there for solidarity, and interact with any other artifact synergy we happen to have. But the vast majority do have these activated abilities that we can take advantage of doing twice. The most obvious thing to do here is abilities that cost a lot of mana. So if you invest 5 mana into the ability, you can spend 1 extra and get the effect twice. That seems really good, and there are certainly some of those effects in the deck, but I think they're actually kind of a trap. Oftentimes expensive abilities like this are actually overcosted or are intended as sort of a mana sink. So if you are holding up mana, you have something to do with it as opposed to actually something that's worth spending that mana on. The most interesting effects are the ones that cost counters, like charge counters or oil counters. There's actually probably enough really cool charge counter synergy stuff that you could do to make a full charge counter deck around Kurkesh. That's not what I did here. It's more of a generally interesting one, but there is enough charge counter synergy in this deck that I did include a couple cards that do nothing if I don't draw other charge counter stuff. It's just that likely that I will draw other charge counter artifacts. Now that we're looking at artifacts with different costs, what kinds of actual effects we're looking for is kind of a different story. What's nice about this as a build around is that kind of anything you might want to do, you can find a way to do in this format. You want removal? We've got that. You want card draw? We've got that. You want to make a bunch of treasures for ramp? We got that. That's actually a really interesting part of this deck in that Kurkesh says you can't double mana abilities. And you probably wouldn't want to because you're spending mana to do it anyway, but you can double treasure creation and things that let you put extra lands into play. Things like Burnished Heart or Realm Breaker. Making treasure is certainly one of the most plentiful effects that we're seeing in this build. But just tokens in general seem to be really the way to go. There's some way of investing mana and getting this lasting impact with it, as opposed to an effect like Fire Breathing, where you're really getting nothing for doubling that effect. And even if you could find a really efficient pump ability, it's only lasting till the end of turn, who cares? Now, counters, like +1/+1 counters, are certainly worth it, but you really want to be getting more than just one per tick. Steel Overseer especially can give us some really cool buff by putting +1/+ counters on each of our artifact creatures. Basically every creature in the deck, except for Kurkesh himself, is an artifact creature, because any ability they have is also an ability from an artifact. Another thing I wanted to try with this deck, and probably it's not worth it, but I wanted to do it, is enchantments and equipment that bestow activated abilities. As long as I am enchanting or equipping an artifact creature, the bestowed ability will still be an artifact ability, even if it came from an enchantment. Of course, you have to watch out for this. If you are using an equipment, you do still need to make sure you're equipping an artifact creature, even though the equipment is an artifact in the first place. This brings us to one of my pet cards, the Dragon Throne of Tarkir. An absolutely silly card that turns one of your creatures into a defender, who can then tap to give each other creature you control plus X equal to their power. Which I just think is really funny, and of course with Kurkesh, we could have it happen twice. This did encourage me to include a number of probably bad cards that are cheap but high stats because they have a hard time attacking normally, but we don't want them to. We just want them to sit in the throne. There are a lot of really fun cards in this deck that are probably too silly for anyone other than me to be excited about them, but there's one card I feel like I really need to take the time to talk about, which is Phyrexian Processor. This is a 4-mana artifact that when it enters the battlefield, you pay as much life as you want. You can then spend 4 and tap it to create an XX, where X is the amount of life you paid when it ETB'd. There's a lot of these like 4 mana, then 4 again to make a token cards, and I don't think they're efficient enough to really be that good. Even in this deck where you get to spend an extra mana and make 2 or make twice as many of those tokens. But here, you want me to spend 4 mana and then 5 mana to make 2 XXs? Okay, yeah, I'll spend like 15 life and then 9 mana to make 2 15/15s. That sounds great. And then I get to do it again next turn, another 5 mana for another 2? It's stupid. It's gonna be stupid. I'm very excited.